So Carmen and I are going to kind of try to just keep this light. We're going to talk back and forth and tell you about our experience and where we started and where we are today. And hopefully there'll be some time at the end for some questions or comments. So again, I'm Matt Mackenzie, and this is Carmen Mackenzie. And so we own two different companies. One, as Ed mentioned, is Mackenzie Atlantic Tool and Die, which is a large manufacturing company, primarily in Musquodoboit Harbor, where we support mostly the defense and aerospace industry. So when Ed talks about technology that we have at play within that business, we have 9-axis CNC machines. We have full robotic systems that run completely automated 24/7. We have a second facility that's integrated with one of the largest defense companies in the Maritimes called Ultra Electronics, which recently secured every sonar that will go on the new Canadian Combat Ships program for the next 25 years. So the majority of mechanical components that go on those ships for those sonar systems will come from Mackenzie Atlantic. So we have that business that's in this sort of rapid growth mode. And we just purchased a new building in Chesapeake actually to help with that expansion and what we hope to be the expansion of Mackenzie Healthcare Technologies. We started Mackenzie Atlantic 16 years ago. Never with the anticipation that we would be where we are today with it, but however, things happen and that's where we are. And 8 years ago, we were approached by some teachers at the Nova Scotia Community College who had some senior students that were engaged with Northwood at the time that were doing a senior project. And that project was that came from Northwood was them looking for a solution to help reposition people who chronically slide forward in their wheelchairs, which didn't sound like a big deal, but it's a massive problem out there in long-term care. And I always used to start pitch competitions and say, anybody that's here, if you'd slide forward in your chair for the duration of my 5 or 10-minute pitch and stay in that forward slouch position for that period of time, to really try to drive home just how uncomfortable it is to stay in that forward slouch position for long periods of time. So if you're sitting right now, and while we're doing this quick presentation, I will say slide forward in your chair as far as you can. And if you can, stay there for the duration of the time that Carmen and I are speaking. So we can try to really show you just what we're talking about in the solution that we tried to come up with. So we started Mackenzie Healthcare Technologies 8 years ago because of that conversation that we had at NSCC and with Northwood, because at the end of the school year, the students they'd come up with a solution, but it wasn't one that was going to be adopted out there in the real world. So they were still looking for a solution. And as an industry partner, asked Carmen and I if we would be interested in sort of taking a look at the problem and seeing if we could come up with an adequate solution. So it sat on the corner of my desk for about a year until I realized that what we really needed to do was put the power in the hands of the people in the wheelchairs. And from that came the idea of Paraglide. So Paraglide is a fully automated repositioning system that attaches to the back of a pre-existing wheelchair. It's composed of a rotating device that you can see here in the bottom left of our slide, that attaches to either the down canes of the wheelchair or the back of the armrests. Attached to that rotating device is a special fabric sheet that travels back and forth with the resident through the day. So it's specially designed so as the resident slides forward, so does the sheet. And then as Paraglide is used to pull them back, the sheet travels with them. And this allows the person to be repositioned as many times throughout the day as they need to. And then as you can also see in the photo, it also has a Bluetooth or a wireless remote control that allows the person in the wheelchair to reposition their own posture at the touch of a button. It takes less than 15 seconds to reposition somebody from a fully slouched position to a properly seated position. And one of the really neat things that we did when we developed Paraglide is if anybody knows what a Fitbit is, or if you have an Apple Watch and it tracks all your steps, the technology that does that is called an accelerometer. So that accelerometer sits on a printed circuit board within your device, and it essentially just sees movement. And there's an algorithm that says, oh, I'm taking a step or I'm walking upstairs. We use that same technology to say that there's somebody actually active in the wheelchair. And from that, we're able to use our own algorithm that sends alerts to the remote control that allows the people in wheelchairs to make educated decisions about when it's time to be repositioned. And that's every hour, according to the Mayo Clinic. In Nova Scotia, the rules are a little bit different. People in wheelchairs are supposed to be repositioned every 2 hours. But we decided when we developed Paraglide that we would try to stick to the best or the gold standard guidelines from the Mayo Clinic, which is every hour. So Paraglide sends an alert and allows the person in the wheelchair to reposition themselves, or have a staff member or a care member come to the side of the wheelchair and reposition them with zero chance of injury. So there's absolutely no physical interaction with the person in the wheelchair that could lead to injury, which is sort of a key point. So I think we're going to go to the next slide.
We're going to play a little video here.
Oh,
but
yes.
I realize I may not have shared sound. So just wait this over here. It should work now. So this is just a 20-second video because it's a lot easier to see what Paraglide's all about when you see it, rather than just have us chat about it. So let's see if this will work.
The Paraglide sheet is designed to travel with the user throughout the day. So as they slide forward, so does the sheet. When they're in an uncomfortable position and want to be repositioned, they simply turn on the remote control, hold the glide button, and let Paraglide do all the work for them, pulling them back into a proper seated position.
So that's very quick.
We wanted to trim that as much as possible because we know we're on short time here. But when Paraglide turns back and pulls the person to a proper seated position, it remembers how many turns it made, and then it unwinds the exact same amount to free the fabric again, so the person can slide freely throughout the day. So it has limitless amount of repositions throughout the day.
And I think the other one thing that we wanted to talk about there was you can see how easy that is. Somebody was just, well, it was Matt, our model for the moment, pressing the glide button, repositions himself, and we have units out there being used right now in nursing homes. And what they've realized is that it's elevated the problem, and it's just brought awareness to the issue of improper seating a little bit more. And everybody's kind of aware of it now where Paraglide is being used. So they've actually had luck teaching housekeeping staff and kitchen staff to say, you know what, if you see somebody who's in an uncomfortable position, pop over them, see if they'd like to be repositioned if they can't use the remote themselves, and press that glide button. So
and family members.
And family members. It's leaving a lot more, it's giving the opportunity for a lot more people to help, and not leaving people in an uncomfortable position when, you know, anybody walking by can help them out.
So there's a really interesting conflict in long-term care with repositioned people, specifically in wheelchairs. So there's these two policies that are kind of at odds, and it's important that we talk about them. So one is called zero lift policy. So essentially, there's work safe practices that say that people in long-term care, and really any industry, shouldn't lift, move, shift, whatever descriptive term you want to use, more than 30 pounds. And so you can imagine that when somebody slides forward in their wheelchair, this poses a really big issue, because you can't say that by using other manual techniques to reposition somebody that you're not going to be moving or shifting or pushing more than 30 pounds, which could lead to musculoskeletal strains and sprains, which has an enormous cost to our healthcare system and to insurance companies. But then on the other flip side, you have the health agencies saying that people in wheelchairs should be, by policy, repositioned once every 2 hours. And we all know that we have all the long-term care facilities are understaffed. And so how do you have these two policies work together? How do you have folks not moving or lifting more than 30 pounds? And then how do you reposition people every 2 hours? And when we did our research early on, we realized that there really was not a solution. The only solution for zero lift, and we would argue that it's not zero lift, is to use a sling in an overhead lift. They typically don't like to leave a sling underneath a resident in a wheelchair because that pressure can lead to skin ulcers, because the slings are very heavy fabric. There's a lot of webbing, very heavy. The sewn seams are very thick. And so that's not ideal. But leaving somebody slid forward isn't ideal either. So when we were developing Paraglide, we really engaged with occupational therapists at Northwood to try to give us feedback on what would be an adequate solution. And we went through a lot of different thoughts, questions, comments, meetings to really try to get the full story of what type of a device would try to solve this problem. And it was important to us that we engaged the end users, being the staff that would be actually doing the repositioning, and the folks that are in the wheelchairs. So we spent a lot of time in front of those people to make sure that we were developing a product that would really meet the needs of the industry, not just something that we thought was cool.
So thankfully, here in Nova Scotia, there are some really great advocates for long-term care and for aging and innovating and trying to keep people in their homes. And so the provincial government has announced a couple of different funds that Paraglide has been eligible to be funded under. Back in 2020, or the very end of 2019, the provincial government launched a continuing care innovation pilot program. And Paraglide was eligible for funding under that program for all nursing homes in Nova Scotia. And so through that program, more than 100 orders for Paraglide came in from right across the province. And we were just gearing up to start production and fulfill those orders. And something hit the world.
Yeah, so, March 2020, roughly, when the pandemic started, we were just starting to ramp up for Paraglide and secure materials and to try to fulfill these orders of Paraglides. And we put everything on halt for about 4 months because the province had put out a request to local manufacturers to try to source and produce PPE. So I was at work and Carmen sent me this list of different things the government was looking to procure. And on that list was face shields. And she said, is this something that we can do? And so that day I made a quick prototype while I was at work, and I came home and I showed it to her, and she took a quick little picture and put it on, I think, Facebook.
Yeah.
And next day our phone was ringing from a bunch of different places saying, can you make these in mass quantity? And how fast. And so we kind of completely switched gears. I let my team at Mackenzie Atlantic do what they do best, which is run that company. And Carmen and I solely focused on face shields for 4 months. So we needed to find a manufacturing space large enough to socially distance staff. And we needed to be able to ramp up quickly. So we hired about 45 people in a matter of a couple weeks. Yeah. I went to Prince Andrew High School, so I happened to know that they had 2 gymnasiums side by side where we could socially distance those staff. I worked with local suppliers mostly. We only sourced overseas when it was absolutely necessary, but we were able to source almost everything within Nova Scotia. And we produced 1.3 million face shields in a period of 4 months.
Went out to Nova Scotia hospitals, both NSH and the NWK, and then we were able to make more. And when we realized we could actually make more than they needed on a weekly basis, we reached out through the Nova Scotia Nursing Home Association and said, hey, do any of your members need face shields? And we had a flood of orders from nursing homes right across the province who couldn't get their hands on PPE. And they were really delighted that we were able to send them the same thing.
Yeah, so at the height, we were making about 20,000 face shields a day. So when that was done, which consumed our lives for 4 months, we jumped back into Paraglide and started to fulfill those orders that came in from the CCI program. And I just, if we can move. Oh, there we go. That's okay. So over a period of 14 weeks, we were able to gather data from 7 different facilities that had received Paraglides. And out of those 7 facilities, they had 24 active Paraglides. And you can see from the data here, in 14 weeks, they were used, those 24 Paraglides were used 2,891 times. So that represents 2,891 potential workplace injuries avoided. And when we compared the amount of time that it takes to reposition somebody using a Paraglide in comparison to using an overhead lift, which is the only other zero lift approved method for repositioning people who've slid forward in wheelchairs, they saved 1,152 hours. So it's important to recognize that this is only 24 Paraglides of the 107 units that were actually shipped out and used. So we wanted to kind of showcase what that would look like if we actually have data based on the averages of the 24 spread over the 107 units. So you can see that if all 107 units were being used over a period of a year, with the same averages of the data collected over the we're out of time. Okay, we're gonna go quick. But 54,000 repositions made or staff time saved would be over 17,000 or 8.5 full-time employees. So some pretty impressive statistics that we got back.
Maybe if we can just leave you with one thing, we'll let this Paraglide user sort of end it off. We'll just let you hear from Richard Dowry, who is a resident of Queens Manor, who's been there for 14 years. And he has been using Paraglide. And he said, I feel much better, but after Paraglide pulls me back, I would have to tilt my power wheelchair back as far as it could go to relieve my constant discomfort. And now I'm not feeling any pain at all. We've got really, really great stories coming out now from the users and the staff who are seeing the real world impact of Paraglide. We're thrilled that it's making a difference for people like Richard. And we're excited about the next steps of getting Paraglides onto out into homes to help people live more comfortably and take control of their repositioning and their independence.